Everybody wave.
Okay, my name is Lance Nichols, and I want to thank you all for coming in today. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today was what we do as American citizens that affect each and every one of us, even as far as our grandparents to our children. What is the most important thing that, as an American citizen, do you guys think we can do?
Vote.
Vote? Anything else?
Take care of your kids.
Take care of your kids? Okay, that's a good one. Well, today we're going to talk about voting and the apathy in the American populace voting. Now, I took a look at a couple of recent elections, and right now I'm going to focus on the mayoral elections and how the outcome was determined in those. In the 2013 mayoral election in Detroit, we had two candidates, essentially both Democratic candidates, going inside the city. But we also had a lot of issues in the city with the bankruptcy, an emergency financial manager. So I wanted to take a look at exactly how many people voted. There were just over 134,000 votes cast in the mayoral election in Detroit. Now that sounds like a pretty small number. The total population in the city is about just below 700,000. Registered voters in the city, you have a little over 500,000. So when you look at the participation rate in that election, that participation rate was just over 25%. Now, there's a lot of people that consider that with all the issues going on, these posts are essentially honorary posts. There's nothing much they can do with the emergency manager right now. But in 2009, that participation rate was 22%. There wasn't any issues like this involved. So actually for Detroit, the participation rate's gone up among registered voters, which is a good thing for the city of Detroit and their future. Now I wanted to take a look at maybe a city a little bit larger than Detroit. So I decided to go to New York City. They also held a mayoral election at the beginning of November. In the city of New York, they had just over 1 million ballots cast in their mayoral election. Out of that 1 million, you had just under 2% that were for third and minor parties. There were up to, depending upon where you voted in the city, there were 10 or 12 options to vote for mayor. But if you look at that participation rate in the city of New York, that's only 24%. This is the largest city in our country where precedent is set for laws, police forces, emergency response. And only 24% of the people that were eligible to vote decided what the next portion of the future of New York City is going to be like. Now back in 2009, that was 29%. So in those 4 years, that's a 16% drop in the amount of participation just from voters in one of the major elections in this country. Now I also wanted to expand this out and look at the presidential elections. 2000 presidential election, and as far as the whole United States goes, we had 240 million people in this country that are eligible to vote. Out of that 240 million, we have over 180 million that were registered. Automatically, a quarter of the citizens that were able to vote have opted to not even bother to register to vote. That quarter of the population does not care what happens to the rest of us. Out of that 180 million, there was a 71.6% participation rate in the presidential election. If you look at those numbers, that's a really good participation rate. But when you look at it in regards to the eligible to vote, that comes down to just under 54% of the people voted to decide how this country was run. I wanted to take and see what could be the complete opposite of a presidential election in the United States. So I went to Afghanistan, a war-torn country that's been in on and off of wars for the last 40 or 50 years. In 2009, they held their first presidential election ever. They had held other elections before that, but it was essentially primary posts that were divided up into all the districts inside of Afghanistan. In that presidential election, there were 12 million people registered to vote. Obviously, it's a lot smaller country than what we have, but out of that 12 million, they had over 8 million ballots cast. That's a 75% participation rate. This is a country that has essentially no infrastructure. Except in the major cities, they have some infrastructure. The people would come from the far districts to vote, and they had a participation level of over 75%. For every 1 percentage point that this goes up right here in the American electorate, that's 1.8 million votes right now. And that number will continue to rise each year. And when we continue to have elections that are as close as they are, state by state, these are important things for us to do. Now, I took a look at some of the smaller elections, your school board, your mayor. These numbers just go down in the smaller cities. Those are the people that affect how you spend your money on a daily basis. That's why it's important that you need to take that time out. Every time there's an election, from president all the way to your local school board, take that time to make your voice heard. Thank you.